it's very possible that the brain chip agenda is the way that they're going to pass their control over to the next era. And the other people be just lost if they don't have books, if they didn't take the chip, if they didn't stay in at night or whatever it was when it happened. They would be totally back in the Stone Age versus people that are still connected to a centralized AI. Who would control such a centralized information platform? Who is claiming that they have not only quantum supremacy, but also claiming they have AI that is now conscious and also is in the business of implants.
These evolutionary leaps that are popping in with cosmic rays that cause like the next generation to be born as different species or have a different trait in a species. I'm talking 40,000, 80, 100,000 years ago coming back in, like how much would this tech really be affected by a species jump through cosmic rays itself, causing the physical form to shift because of radiation? And to add on to that, Hapgood Lloyd 2 years ago had to put an order in for 1.5 million new shipping containers. So where do those 1.5 million shipping containers go? Continuity, government, whatnot, but all that cargo, it's being packed up, long-term storage, and then put underground or put into a base or put somewhere. In the vehicle that's easily moved, it's already in a container, just load it on the truck. It's already in a rail car, just string them together and pull them down the tracks. It's really that fast. It seems fishy about all these rail cars disappearing.
You know, that's odd that you bring that up because one of our listeners is a conductor up in the northeast or northwest, excuse me. He was giving me information before the pandemic started about how they were going to be reducing train traffic and how that everybody had to be on a special list to be using the rail. So they were giving them continuity of government memos, I guess, telling them that things were going to change and that how they were going to be taking control. So I would like to get in touch with him because he kind of went off the grid, retired, and I'd like to ask him about all of that because he seemed to know that things were about to be changing. As we now know that they're doing weird stuff with the rail cars. So it would be very interesting to get an inside view on some of what's really going on as far as the railways are. And you remember they kind of showed us what they could do with one barge, that one that weirdly just went sideways in the Panama Canal there. You imagine if that happened again for whatever reason, because, you know, it seemed like they just turned and went ashore on purpose, but maybe not. But then you have all of these things going on in Iran, and we know if they shut down that little strait and then the Black Sea, what's going on with the Ukraine, you could see that in 4 or 5 places globally, they could shut down the entire trade for the world with just a few places because of the way that we do shipping like that.
Yeah, and how would the world recover? Because I was talking with Jeffrey Nyquist earlier, and he was saying that some intercepted emails that had come out of Russia had posed this to different analysts. This is the question that was asked to different analysts. If, let's say, a impactor meteor shower of biblical proportion, you know, like Hamlet's Mill kind of cataclysm of impactors were to hit the West, quote unquote, like America, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, if it were all impactors were to hit all those countries and stop all those nations, would Russia still be able to survive? Now, that was the question posed to the analyst. Think about how that works out into, oh, now we just turn it over into sanctions. So instead of asking them the real question, could it, with sanctions, survive? They made it out as a cometary bombardment event. How are they using the human mind against us is the question, more or less, because what you're saying is, and what I'm seeing too, is every story is getting heavier and denser, more fear, and it just keeps winding this spring so incredibly tight on everybody. How are the human emotion being used to facilitate this great reset and what the elite want, having us do it for them? And, you know, we've talked about this topic a little before.
Well, it seems like they're just trying to get everybody into the confusion fear thing so that basically they never do anything and they're just in this, rut. What do you call it? Purgatory, I guess, kind of where they're just sitting there. They don't know what to do. Nothing's happening. So, of course, they depend on the only structure that they know, and that's the government. I just feel like there are just so many people locked in this system. I'm sure that you could just take a minute and go through, like, say, TikTok or something, and you see how off in another world the majority of the youth is, but not just the youth. People our age are completely in their own world about what's important. They'll constantly have them out there protesting or burning stuff down. And I'm actually waiting for this year. I'm expecting, like I said, by the end of the summer that we'll see more civil unrest actually here in the US. Now, it may be sparked by some kind of political event, but when you add all these other stresses, like you're saying, it's a way to make everything a fire ready to just burst into flames. And then give everybody the reality of them artificially shutting down the planet's food supply at the right time before we go into another cycle. We've seen every bit of the playbook that's going on right now, except for now it's on a world scale. And I don't think people are catching on to that you could choose to opt out before they get enough power.
But how long will the disruption last? And more importantly, are you ready for the full length of that disruption? Because obviously the first few days, few weeks are going to be the most difficult until you start to get things a little bit settled in and routines down and faster and easier ways to do things. Then the food's going to come in. You'll be having to grow your own food. And I can tell you over this last couple of weeks, getting the fence out, getting the garden in, it's actually been more than 3 weeks now, doing some things around in the fruit trees and whatnot, fertilizing this, cutting some bush back there. It's very labor intensive, and luckily we have enough food where you can still work a full day, fill your belly, put that protein and calories back in, and then be ready to work the farm the next day. Well, if you're in a food lean time, you put in a full work day like you do now, bring all that energy back in so you can continue to work on a farm like that, or even grow the food and all the tasks. Because think about if electricity went down for a while, which I hope it wouldn't, you'd be washing clothes by hand. Then you get into a whole, wow, who's going to do all these tasks just to even keep the basic life functions going? Well, then you can see why around a huge amount of the world that people don't have so many clothing possessions as others in the West, where they might be able to press a button and wash their clothes. Imagine doing it by hand. I'd have like 2 shirts. Like when I would backpack, I would do them in the sink or in the shower, T-shirts, obviously, or even just real thin cotton shirts. But I can remember just a handful of shirts because I would just keep rewashing them on each day or two. But it would be the same thing. You wouldn't have nearly a number of clothes if you had to wash them by hand. I'm just saying there's a lot of things that are going to change right now. And it's going to come incredibly fast. And the stock market crash that you're looking at, if you go over to, the Economist magazine, the year ahead, 2022, these covers are quite telling for the future. But it looks like there's a lot of encoding of stock market crashes, reductions, and then just incredible gains from I'm going to say August, September. Maybe that's crypto. But food pricing too, when it hits that, food prices will be the highest they've ever been, and gas too, everything.
No, I was thinking we may be going into an era where you just might have to start thinking a little different. Maybe it's a good idea to ask some of your neighbors if they're interested in gardening too, or maybe letting you use their land and giving them a portion of the food. I think everybody's going to have to go back to the old ways of things, and that way we could just make it through any kind of hardship we have.
Yeah, that would involve sharing with the neighbors. And also, if you have extra bounty at that point, same in the Depression, people who had extra would give food to their neighbors or somebody else poor in the neighborhood that couldn't get food. We're talking Great Depression stories here. Everybody was fed all the time because extra food arrived to those who didn't have or couldn't grow. And that's the way we'll need to be thinking about this too. So if you have the extra bounty, if you have a few extra seeds, maybe they won't germinate next year or the next year because they've been in the wrong heat or saving condition. Perhaps just plant it, grow it, know that you can bring it to seed, at least some of it, and just get extra food out there for everybody growing right now, because what a tradable thing that would be, especially if you were able to replicate it and that was your skill set. Now, I think about gradualism in the amplification. Each day gets a little more tense, a little more tense. You don't notice the difference.
It's a cloudy thing now. I mean, like, I can go over and turn on the TV and watch antenna television, like the local, news broadcast or whatever, and they're playing their shows. Or you could go to streaming, or you could read the news headlines. All of them have the same exact topics. It started to make me nauseous in the way that everything is connected.
Like those decisions, the way that the reset's going to go, it's going to fractal or fracture into several different units for a while. But then again, at the end of it, control is going to want to be retained. So let's say we go to 2030, 2032, 2035. Everybody out in the countryside's already gotten completely new ways of lifestyle set up. Like if it starts to break down in 2023, by 2035, 10, 12 years, the countryside's going to be a fully functional, autonomous, we don't even need you place. But then the government's be like, it's like back in the 1900s. Actually, I'll tell you a slide. I've been working on this titled 125 years ago. You didn't have to ask permission from the government to. Now, this is what I'm saying. We're going to go back to this for a while here. Everybody's going to collect their own rainwater. Everybody's going to go fishing. And see, that's the thing. I wanted to talk to a couple hunting and fishing guides, if anybody out there listening. How long is it going to take for all the fish to be depleted after people start to go fishing to supplement when it gets too expensive so they can't buy? How long before the waters will be completely freaking fished out and people will be fishing with like pantyhose that thin of a net to get every last minnow or snail or whatever out of the water because they all need that much food and protein and it's not around? How long before everything's fished out? But then also owning a property and starting a business and knowing how to build a home, knowing how to hunt, how to clean your game, how to cut your own hair, and how to sell food. You didn't need a permit back then. 125 years ago, you didn't have to ask permission from the government to. And I'm saying with the supply chain breakdown happening and centralized systems are absolutely going to go to almost zero. You can see it in writing. It is so clear as day now. I wish the timeline would change. I really hope it does a hard turn right or a dog leg left, because if we continue on this trajectory here, the society is going to fractal. Like the cities are going to get under control, like Ransom, you've been talking about. But the countryside is going to break away into its own thing, totally autonomous. I don't know how quickly they'll try to rein everybody back in under the control, but you can see how long it took 125 years for us to get back into this same system now where you do need to pay to collect rainwater. It's illegal somewhere. You cannot go fishing without a license or on private property. You can't start a business without a license. You can't build a home or even make a change to your home without a business, and da-da-da-da-da. You can't even sell food without a license. So I'm wondering if we wind the clock back, maybe it was 1816, maybe Tambora really wiped out crop production enough where there was a society where not being told of functionally what they were using with vortices to generate power, like vortex power, versus burning something. You let water spin everything for you because it's heavier and denser. But pressurized steam at certain densities also will equal that. But there's so much involved in getting steam up to the pressure that water would push at for free. Victor Schauberger is somebody you want to check out with vortex power and gravitational vortex power. Now, perhaps these systems were back, let's say, in the mid-1800s, early 1800s. Railroads weren't too far after that in the 1850s. So you can think that there must have been some progress. Like, going from riding a horse to a locomotive, that's a huge jump in like 20 years. And then we're going to lay tracks everywhere, and these super giant locomotives come out of where? Some shipbuilding things in the 1700s. They moved from completely wood ships into iron hulls powered by steam in less than 50 years. Like this kind of evolutionary jump. So we had wooden ships for the last 5,000, 7,000 years, and then suddenly just bam, in 50 years or less, we went right to steamships. I don't know. There's a piece missing somewhere. But perhaps we're going through this reset several times and we're just here naturally on it again. So Ransom, I'll ask you, how quickly, if this new society forms off centralized systems and the whole social credit score evolves over in the cities, and these two are marching parallel into the full-on crash, into the full-on collapse, into the depths of it, and the rebuilding coming out, 10, 12, 15 years from now, they're still running parallel. One didn't try to overtake the other. How long do you think it's going to play out before that one system that's centralized is going to be like, get your asses back here. You're paying taxes. You're going to pay for the rainwater. You've been off this. You got to pay for the food. You need to pay sales tax when you sell it. How long do you think that'll be before they get roped back in? Or I'll be part of this crew out in the countryside rolling forward. So that's why I'm asking the question.
I actually don't think it'll take much time at all. I think what they plan on doing is crashing everything and then using the digital identification, credit score, criminal record. They've been pushing for the world ID, and it just keeps going and progressing until you see what they want, and they already have these systems set up. So what's going to happen is, in my opinion, is they're going to crash everything, the economies, all of it. And the way to all of a sudden claim your identity and your property and your money and your crypto and everything is to join their system, or you don't get to play in any of it. And I think people that try to stay out of that, that have proof of property, the deeds, the titles, are going to find themselves where they don't actually own anything. And there's already been examples of this. You remember with the housing crisis that they were having, where banks were actually foreclosing on homes that they didn't even own and that they didn't have the paperwork. And when people had the deeds, they would show up to court and the judge would side with the bank every time. But to throw you back out there in the weird world, I think
Throw me, boomerang me back there, man. I need to get to the weird, because the common right now, or the normal now, is too strange. I want the weird.
How do you protect your electrical device from an EMP or a solar flare or anything? You put it into a Faraday cage, or you hide it underwater. Now, if there was an implant made out of non-reactive materials to protect it from cosmic rays, radiation, magnetic waves, etc. Now, is not the human being exactly one of those devices? So if you had a phone or a tablet or a TV or a computer or any of that stuff, and a big EMP happened, it would fry all of that stuff. That stuff would be useless. However, if you had a chip buried in your skull, or it grew there via new technologies, programmable nanotubulars, and all they need is source material at the location that they're going to be. We're in that time right now where they're introducing all of that stuff into the human body, where it is possible to grow something inside of the body or just implant it the old-fashioned way, and that device would be protected. Now, if you had a centralized control system somewhere in the earth that was also protected, all of the old technology would be destroyed. All of the devices, smartphones, etc., but you'd still be connected via the implant inside of your body that would be protected. Companies are doing science in this field that you don't even know about, and then you add in all of these components and resources necessary are already being allocated to the population. Let's just say it that way.
That magnetic field thing. Yeah, Faraday cage are deep enough under the earth, and then also insulated as a ground, even in the earth, because the earth can carry current itself through the minerals in the crust. They're called veins. Some of these veins are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles long and wide and different depths. So imagine like the copper veins. The reason that was the 1989 solar flare and then also the Carrington event were centered over what we consider like the northeast part of North America here, northeast U.S., Canada, is because there's huge amounts of minerals there. That's why there's all the bauxite and aluminum mining, copper mining, iron ore mining. That whole area of the entire planet is just one solid metal mass in the crust. So any kind of electrical field line is going to come down on there, because it's like having the largest wire on the planet that it can connect to. It's going to go straight in there. So with that being said, how deep would you need to be underground to withstand cosmic rays? Because, again, going to these underground cities, they were obviously able to withstand the cosmic rays, even at 100 foot deep, 200, 400 feet deep. And then these caves around the planet, they go miles into the earth. But the human species has been well known to morph and mesh and bend with cosmic ray events on evolutionary leaps as well. So with that tech in the body, so let's think about it. Let's go back, because we love talking about Denisovans and Neanderthals. So let's say Denisovan had been rewired with the same exact thing, and Neanderthal as well with the same exact thing in different epochs of history. But these evolutionary leaps that are popping in with cosmic rays that cause like the next generation to be born as different species or have a different trait in a species. I'm talking 40,000, 80, 100,000 years ago coming back in, like how much would this tech really be affected by a species jump through cosmic rays itself, causing the physical form to shift because of radiation? You always talk about like three-legged frogs or like six-legged sheeps or something popping out from a radiological disaster in an area. There'll be a two-headed something that pops out, right? Those are the kind of gene traits I'm talking about. Radiation tweaks the species itself. So I'm just wondering if the species gets tweaked in a certain way, the Homo sapiens sapien, with massive cosmic ray bombardment as our Earth's magnetic field depletes and goes to zero in some places with rips in it that allows UVB radiation to actually hit the planet's surface and fry that area. So Ransom, I would pose the question then, if Homo sapiens sapien is going to change because we're coming into a very depleted magnetic field on our planet, which means an enormous amount of cosmic rays. I mean, really like species changing types of densities of cosmic rays coming in. At that point, is it for us now, or is it for us as we get into this cosmic ray density and change, which would mean that the elites would know exactly when the cosmic ray density would increase on this cycle, have it mapped out to start to take effect at a certain year and month. Who has that kind of information? You're going back millions of years to understand that. So whoever's hiding underground after every one of these cosmic events pops back out with their intact tech and just keeps it going forward. Wouldn't surprise me if somewhere they're 3,000 years ahead in the technology, if that were to be the case. 5,000 years ahead, just based on our recorded history, going back to like the Hittites 5,000 years prior. So really, what is this tech? It's not ready yet until the cosmic rays come in, and then the human jumps into that field where that programmable nanotech you're talking about is inside, and then boom, it just syncs up with the human. Right now, we're not in a syncing pattern, but just getting there, just going to be there in a few months, just as the next magnetic field planet aligns. And maybe this tech only works in a depleted magnetic field. Maybe it'll actually itself turn on when the magnetic field weakens further. You don't know the parameters of this programmable nanotech. Got to be mapped out already where the magnetic field is going to go in which years and which months, how much radiation that's going to send in inbound, which years, which months. And then there would be the inverse that they've done thousands and thousands of papers on of, how many volcanic eruptions and volcanoes would occur in a depleted or very low magnetic field. If you had millions and millions and millions of years of records, you would know for sure down to the nth degree, really, what kind of intensity it was, when the onset was, and how long it would last. Because there's a good amount of information about this grand solar minimum heading into it right now. There's so many stories in history of empires risen and fallen. You'd know right now, you'd be riding on top of this cycle, resetting everything.
I think we are talking about these implants, and I kind of have this theory that you could put it inside someone, you could put it inside an animal. They've already proven that. They put it in monkeys, pigs, etc., and had a real connection. So you got that. And the reason I say that is because we know in the past, speciation and, extinction happens pretty fast. And here's an idea that I've been thinking about. So I read this story. It's talking about a Siberian tiger that gives birth to a rare litter at Six Flags Great Adventure. And so for some reason, my mind just goes in this idea of thinking about, they're talking about there's only 500 in the wild. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, when things go extinct or speciations happen, it's usually or generally because one species adapts to a certain thing and lives, and the others of its same species die out. It's more than natural selection or survival of the fittest. Certain things that are out of the genetic sphere happen that make animals go in one direction or other. One example of that is the house cat. And we know that their brains are shrinking over time, and it's because of not hunting and different things like that. They just sit around. The same thing is happening for the big cats, but the even stranger idea, or cooler idea, I think, is what's happening to the small amount of still wild animals out there in the wild. Well, what's happening is the ones that are still alive are the best ones at evasion. They're the smartest. They're the best predator. Those are the ones that are breeding in the wild population. So the big predators that are out there are evolving in a way where they're going to become better predators. And we have programs protecting them. So they're going to find food one way or the other. So you start thinking about this speciation that's happening right before our eyes. And then also think about all the programs that they're running that I've talked about before. There's a program in North America to bring back Ice Age animals, populations of that. In Europe, they're doing the same thing. We're not only trying to bring back animals that exist in low numbers and make them big, but we're also trying to bring back, for some reason, Ice Age animals but with a little twist, because now we're tinkering with their DNA. So it's not going to be the original animal, it's going to be a new created animal. And once you see that, you realize they're doing that to the entire planet. So I think that they have control over something they just don't have control over. I think that this might have actually happened before. Somebody tried to design a world with designer animals, and just like every other civilization, there's collapsed. They always do. I mean, it's just part of empire. As an empire collapses, hopefully what comes out of it next is something better. But this time is a little bit different than all of the other times, possibly. And that's because we have a technological finger in every aspect of this transition. And while we're all in la la land, they're doing some serious scientific experiments on a world stage. And my epiphany is there's speciation happening right now, and someone's planning it. So all these critters that they're talking about that are going extinct, that they're protecting, they may evolve into something we're not prepared for.